How's it going, everyone? I hope you're all doing good. Welcome to another drawing tutorial. In this one, it's going to be a texturing guide for grass, leaves and tree bark. And so in a previous video I quickly showed you this technique for creating trees, and that was really simple, whereas in this guide we are going to go more in depth. I'll walk you through the complete process step by step of how to create each one of these textures. We're going to start off with grass, and I know it doesn't sound too interesting, we're drawing grass, but bear with me and we'll get on with this.
Okay, so I'm going to be drawing out 3 squares where I can create an example of each texture. We will start from the left to create this grass texture, and I'm also going to be showing you each pencil I'm using for each stage of the process. Another thing I want to say before we really get into this is that we are going to draw each of these by layering different pencil work on top of each other from light to dark. So of course, let's start off by taking a light 2H pencil and making a base layer. What we are doing with this is creating scratchy, random lines with the pencil. Make these random and quickly drawn. After all, we are creating a grass texture, and so we have to try and imagine how it would appear realistically. So this is really lightly done just to get an idea of what it is we are doing here, but we will put that 2H aside and move on to a HB pencil, so this is slightly darker. And all we are really doing here is the same as we did a second ago, creating these random pencil marks which suggest the texture of the grass. Now once we have that done, this is where we have to take more time. Using a 2B pencil, I'm going to start working into this at a smaller and more accurate scale. Taking into consideration the lines we have previously made, I start making darker marks with the pencil around these. You'll most likely notice that it's as if I'm outlining these lighter lines, but at the same time I'm adding more marks with the pencil in between these. Now this is a slow process and it won't make it look realistic just yet, but it brings out the lighter marks we made earlier. I'm also just having these overlap and weave in between and around each other. When I put it into real time, you'll see how long it actually takes. Also, I'll be putting more real time footage at the end of the video again. In the previous tutorial where we covered skin texture, I put all the real time footage at the end of the video, and a lot of you found that really useful, so I'm going to make that a regular thing in these tutorials. Once we have all that done, we can finally take a darker 4B pencil, and this is the stage where we make it really stand out. So around and in between these lines we have just made, I start darkening areas and creating small marks. You don't have to be so precise with this either, just focus on making the individual blades of grass stand out. You'll find that the darker marks we are making here are a lot smaller, but they make a big difference when it comes to this grass texture. So finally, once we have done all that, and by this stage you've probably had enough of drawing grass, but I'm going to take an eraser, and to be more specific, this is a mono 0 eraser, but with this I start taking up some of the pencil work and creating strokes with it randomly around the grass, and this adds some slight highlights and it really finishes off that realistic appearance. Also, if anyone's wondering, I have a list of all the equipment that I use when I create realistic pencil drawings in the description.
So that's how to create a texture for grass, and I think that turned out pretty good. I mean, grass isn't the most interesting thing to draw, but it's always useful to know how to do it. Now we're going to move on to the leaf texture.
Okay, now let's start with a 2H again, and you'll find that we follow a similar process with all of these, where we work upwards to the more darker pencils. However, let's start by making some simple shapes. Now there's so many different types of leaves and plants which turn out to appear differently. In this guide, I'm going to create a real simple shape. You can see that it's pretty much like an oval with a point at the end. You can change it up and draw these differently, but for the purpose of this example, I'll just do it like this. So first thing we need to do is lightly draw these in and have them sometimes overlapping each one another. Once we have sketched those lighter marks, we will take the HB pencil and start to work into this with more darker lines, creating these individual leaf shapes, but this time making it more specific. Focus on how you position your shapes and have them going in different directions. It really comes down to what result you are after and what you are drawing, and it's also easy to change this up and alternate the way you place these. Now, like we did with the last one, take a 2B pencil and really start filling out these shapes with thicker outlines. As we are doing this, create some darker elements between the leaves. You don't have to do this, but I think it adds a nice effect. It might get a little repetitive, but the results will be worth it. You've probably noticed that I'm coming in and out of time-lapse, but you can still see what it is I'm doing. Finally, once this is done, we take that darker 4B pencil and start putting more life into this. Notice how I'm shading in these individual leaves now, but I'm also leaving a thin line halfway on some of them. This is how they sometimes appear, and even though it might not be 100% realistic, it still gives that impression. Whilst we are shading this in, it's also a good idea to make some of the other areas darker. And this is creating a texture without a reference, and if we was working from a reference, it would end up looking a lot more like it does in real life. However, since this is from imagination, it's a simple process that can be applied every time you want to create a texture like this.
So that was how to draw some kind of a leaf texture, and there's loads of different ways to go about creating the effect of like a bush or some shrubbery. I could probably do some videos on that if you want me to. Now we're going to move on to the next one, on tree bark.
Okay, to start, as always, pick up that 2H pencil and get creating some light base layers. We are creating a lot more straight and directed strokes with the pencil for this. Next, we take the HB and start building on top of this and adding more lines. You'll probably notice how I'm directing most of the lines I make in the same direction. This can really change and vary in appearance depending on what it is you are trying to draw. For instance, you could have these lines going straight down or angled to the other side. It all comes down to the image you are drawing. However, I'm just adding some thicker, more heavier lines, and also at this stage I'm suggesting the placement of some minor features like how the bark can twist and form, can also extend outwards and overlap in some cases. Now it's time to start taking that 2B pencil and adding more detail. I'm working in between the lines we have just made and also creating more randomly placed marks to suggest how the bark of the tree looks. There's not one way to go about doing this, but look at how I'm making these pencil marks and how they have started to suggest more detail. You probably learn more from this stage by looking at the real-time footage at the end, so remember that that's there if you need it. Now there is a section of this tree bark which I'm drawing which appears differently from the rest. The knot of the tree bark where I start to twist my lines around each other and in more of a circular motion. Remember when we created a wood texture in one of the previous videos and we did something similar with that? Adding these small details can really help to recognise what it is we are drawing. The texture is very rough here, so don't create too many soft lines and curves. Another thing that is worth noting is how you can suggest the shading by simply changing how dark you make the pencil marks and the texture, and this can apply to each one of them that we have done. I always try to show the shading through the texture work, and for example it can be seen here that further to the right of the tree it gets a little darker. Keep going back and adding more into this, building on top of what you previously made with the pencil. Once you think you are getting close to finishing, take a step back and look at the overall drawing. You might realise that you need to make some lines, minor adjustments, or make some areas more darker to stand out more. Every tree is different, and so you don't have to worry about drawing it in one way. You can take it in any direction you want to. At the end here, I'm just going to use a 4B pencil and just darken some of these areas and make those lines more prominent. Once that's done, then this is pretty much completed.
So there we go, that is 3 realistic textures ticked off the list of all the others that we'll probably be doing through future videos. I've also done one of these previously where I covered wood, brick and metal, so if you're interested in that then I'll put a link in the description or something. But thank you for watching this, I hope you found it helpful. If you did, then please give it a like because it really helps me out. Other than that, have yourself a great day. I'll see you in the next one.